The metaphor, the idea that I want you to hang on to for this part of your relationship, these first 3 years, is that you are walking through a dark and scary wood. And your goal is to make sure that you keep your hand on your partner's hand so that when you emerge out of the dark and scary wood, you are still connected and still holding on to each other, and you have a starting point for reconnecting to intimacy. If you let go of each other and you feel like you are navigating that dark and scary wood by yourselves and hating your partner because they're not holding your hand, you're going to have a much harder time when you emerge out of the dark and scary wood to reconnect.
Welcome to the Sex After Kids podcast, a place for parents to come and learn together about the sometimes bumpy road back into the saddle of their sex life after adoption, childbirth, or joining a blended family. I am your host, Sophia Ashley, certified sex educator and sex coach, mother and stepmother, and your totally TMI guide to becoming BFFs with your body and initiating easy, connected, and confident, naked, sexy fun times. Here we are, one part science of sex, one part mindfulness magic, and one part straight up real talk to help you find the spark in your relationship and yourself after kids. I am so glad you are here.
Welcome back to the Sex After Kids podcast. So glad to have you here. Today, we are going to talk about sex after delivery or kind of postpartum in those first 3 years. So, if you are beyond that phase, you might want to skip today's episode, but I also think there will be some helpful stuff for you here. This is a tough and tender time. It is probably the time when the habits you are stuck in now that your kids are 5, 6, 7, 8 started. And so, if you are pregnant and listening to this, or if you have pregnant friends, or if you are in that early postpartum phase, this is a must listen episode. And if your kids are a little bit older, maybe you can rewind time and think about where some of your unhelpful habits have started so that we can break them. Let's dive in. So, today we're going to talk about 6 myths of postpartum sex or sex after delivery, and a few of my tips on how to keep and maintain your intimacy and your connection through this pretty tough period, right? If I rewind back 7 years now almost to having my first, right? Especially if you're listening to this and this is your first babe, hoy, everything is new. It's a whole new world. There's a lot of anxiety. You're trying to keep a tiny human alive. There's not a lot of sleeping that happens. And you've welcomed this third little being into your duo, and that shifts things a lot. So, myth number 1 is the 6 weeks and you're good to go myth, right? So, we've all heard this, and if you're a dad listening in particular, I want you to tune in here. Um, we kind of have this idea that we go to our 6-week postpartum checkup. Somebody looks at our downstairs business and says that we're good to go. And if we don't know that this is a myth from the beginning, we can already end up in a pressure cooker situation where partners are counting down the days to that 6-week checkup. And partners who delivered a baby are typically not even thinking about it or counting down the days with dread, knowing that their partner is going to expect something to happen then. And the reason this is a myth is because your sexual readiness has way more to do than your equipment being ready to go. Physical readiness, if we're talking about equipment, can take up to a year or longer. So just because your stitches have healed, just because your tearing has downgraded or whatever, doesn't mean that a person's physical body is ready to go. You just carried up to 9, 10 pound thing in your body. Your muscles have moved and relaxed. Your tailbone has literally moved out of the way to let a baby come out of your body. If you had a C-section, you just went through major surgery on your abdomen and that part of your body. So, purely from a physical perspective, we need to really extend that 6 weeks, honestly, to about 12 months. And just know that anywhere in that period is where somebody might start to feel more physically ready. I've known people who wanted to have sex before that 6 week mark. They were ready, they were in the mood, they were excited about it. And I've known people who didn't want anyone to be even going near that part of their body for much longer. So we have to recalibrate our expectations. The other piece here is that emotional readiness is a huge part of this. When you've been through labor and delivery, there's a lot of, can be a lot of, especially in our Western medical like pregnancy space, negative association with that part of your body. So a lot of women, if you're listening, or a lot of birthing folks can be very like afraid of what that part of their body looks like now. They can be afraid of how it's going to feel for their partner to be in there, like for them. So they worry it's going to hurt. And they also worry, right, with all these negative stereotypes around like loose vaginas and wide vaginas, they worry that their partner's experience is not going to be what it used to be. Men and non-birthing partners can also have these fears and worries that are fed by these stereotypes and cultural images that we have around society. We also just went through like a major thing that happened there, right? So I had a lot of anxiety during my pregnancy. If you went through fertility treatments, if you were working really hard to get pregnant and sex became a job and a function rather than a place to play, then there's going to be emotional tenderness around connecting in that way. And we have to honor that when there's emotional tenderness, that creates physical tenderness for somebody's body. The bottom line here is there is no magic day for when someone is ready. It's an ongoing dialogue with your partner about how you want to connect and how you need to connect, how you're feeling in your body, and what you want to do and what you're feeling ready for. And I will also note, and we've talked about this at length in other episodes, but in particular, stress and anxiety and a lack of sleep are really going to play a number on people's libidos. And so, really, in those first 3 years, recalibrating those expectations, being generous and kind with one another are huge, because when you are a sleep deprived zombie, when you are exclusively breastfeeding and up several times in the night to feed a tiny baby, sex is just the last thing that's on your mind. And that doesn't mean that it's not something that's important to your relationship, but it does mean that how you approach it might change. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. The metaphor, the idea that I want you to hang on to for this part of your relationship, these first 3 years, is that you are walking through a dark and scary wood. And your goal is to make sure that you keep your hand on your partner's hand, so that when you emerge out of the dark and scary wood, you are still connected and still holding on to each other, and you have a starting point for reconnecting to intimacy. If you let go of each other and you feel like you are navigating that dark and scary wood by yourselves and hating your partner because they're not holding your hand, you're going to have a much harder time when you emerge out of the dark and scary wood to reconnect. Not impossible, it's just going to be a higher mountain to climb. Myth number 2: moms don't have sex. So, this is where we get into like cultural stereotypes. And why I'm so fascinated about sex after children is that we have all kinds of stories about women in sex and men in sex and how they're supposed to engage in sex and who is supposed to want what and when and how. And we also have a different set of stories about parents and sex and motherhood in particular in sex. So we can kind of get lost in a bit of this Madonna horror complex, which, if you're new to that, is just this idea that she can't be a mother and have a sexuality or sexual needs. And so many of us, as we shift into this motherhood identity or this parenthood identity, will unknowingly like kill that sexual part of ourselves because we don't feel like those two things can coexist. Or our partner might do that in their perception of us. So they go, she is the mother of my children. She can't also be the person I do freaky, sexy shit with. And that's a head play from society. The bottom line is you are a red blooded human with a partner you love, and you have the right to experience the pleasure that your body was designed for, no matter your parenting status. But it can be a bit of a mind fuck. And if we're not aware that that script is playing for us, it can be killing our libido. It can be killing our desire for sex. It can be killing our ability to show up to sex in the ways that we want to. So, something to be mindful of. Myth number 3 is that your partner is desperate to bone. And the thing that I like to bring up here for mamas or the lower libido partner or for the birthing partner in particular is it can feel like your partner is desperate to get back in your pants and that's the only thing that they care about and they don't value you outside of that part of what you can deliver. And the reframe that I want to offer here is, and this is not an always thing, like you might have a partner who's motivated that way, and that's problematic, and you might want to work on that. And also, most of the men I talk to, and most of the men who engage in, the kind of content that we work on here, are just looking to connect with you. And what you want to keep in mind is if you've had your first babe, you used to be two. And all of the spotlight that you had for intimacy, for sharing yourself as a person with another person, was really focused on your partner. They got all of or most of your love, your affection, your touch, your adoration. And they got to share in the pleasures of your body as you gave them permission to. And now this little baby comes in and especially if you're exclusively breastfeeding, it's like your spotlight disappears from them and goes entirely to the baby. And that's partly fed from the way we teach people to parent, which is that you're a bad parent if you don't give all of your attention to your babes, which is another myth about parenting and postpartum. But you have to put yourself in the position. If I put myself in the position of my partner, he used to get my loving greetings. He used to get my touch. He used to be able to play with my boobs when I gave him permission to. And now I a switch was flicked and all of that is off. And depending on the emotional maturity level of your partner, depending on the stories he believes about sex, he may only know sex as the tool that he uses to get affection. And so if the tap got turned off there, you best your bet he's going to be knocking on the door to be like, hey, I need some of that tap back, even just a little bit of it. So, as the birthing partner, I think it's really important. My encouragement to you is just to remember we have a hierarchy here, and the hierarchy is your baby needs a healthy mama or parent, and your baby needs a healthy couple. They need a healthy, loving relationship to grow up in. So we have got to put the oxygen mask on. We have got to leave some of that light and energy for ourselves because if we're parenting from a place of depletion, we're not being the best parent we can be. And we also have to remember to put some of that oxygen into our relationship with our partner. That doesn't mean that has to be sex, right? But it does mean we have to remember that spotlight needs to shift up occasionally. For my higher libido partners, for my non birthing partner, what I need you to remember is the earlier postpartum you are, the more I need you to just give your partner grace that though she may want, or though they may want to give you affection in the way they used to, it is really challenging for them to do that, especially in the first trimester after babe. So, first 3, 4 months, you are going to be pouring more affection, support, and love into this person who is like physically depleting herself to raise this infant, right? This infant is like feeding off of her if you're chest feeding, then you are going to get back. And you need to play the game of knowing that doesn't mean she doesn't love you anymore. That doesn't mean she doesn't appreciate what's happening. That doesn't mean that they aren't, still in this game. It means the balance has shifted. And when someone has a baby, we need to support them. We need to give them more than they can give back to us because they're giving to babe. That should equalize over time as baby gets older. It's going to take longer than you think, especially even in like the first year, really. Like it might not equalize until like year 2, 3. So, reshifting your calibration around that, but both of you remembering again, if we go back to that holding the hand metaphor, and I'll talk about tips in the last section, how do we continue to feed each other's connection cup outside of sex, and inside of sex if that's a limit that feels good for us. Okay, so your partner is not desperate to just get into your pants. He's lost the warm, glowing spotlight of your love, and he's feeling a little bit lost and disoriented. I'm encouraging you to have empathy for that and offer the pieces you can. And for the person who's lost the limelight, just be patient and be supportive. And the more you give to your partner, without depleting from yourself, because you matter too, the more that's going to come back to you in dividends later, so that you're not one of these couples who has 3, 4, 5 year olds who hate each other. Okay. All right. Myth number 4 and 5. So, myth number 4 is that your first time after having a baby, your first time back in the sack after having a baby, is going to hurt or going to be shitty. And I think that just like we tell girls in particular that their sexual debut is going to hurt, we normalize that first time moms are going to experience pain during this time as well. And it could hurt. I mean, you're about to do something that's kind of new. It's kind of like being a virgin or like making your sexual debut, but it's not inevitable. And there are actually many things that you can do to minimize pain and discomfort or eliminate them. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on, but this is a big part of why I teach what I call the Naked Sexy Time framework is preparing for that first time and treating that first time like it's your first time almost, and being just really intentional about how you navigate it can make it actually a fun and enjoyable and relaxing experience instead of tensing yourself for one that hurts. So it does not need to hurt, it should not hurt. And there are things that we can do about that. I will say, I remember, because I'm a sex coach, because I know this, I like put a lot of focus on my first time back. And I think there's something to be said for not pushing yourself and not forcing yourself when you don't want to, and really honoring and respecting your body's needs and limits. And also understanding that avoidance can come from fear that's not really legitimate, or that you can like like imagined fear, I guess, and that you can work around. And we can also lose momentum on sexual connection, and then we can get into the habit of not. And when we're in the habit of not, it can feel like we don't want to, but it's just our brain has sort of been tricked into the fact that like thinking that doing it is going to take too much energy. So I would say if you find yourself in the habit of not, sometimes you need to add a little bit of momentum, a little bit of force, a little bit of push to get yourself over that hump. But it should never feel like you are dragging yourself kicking and screaming to do this. So I would say I was kind of like really heavily putting a load on it being like quote unquote perfect. And that meant like delaying it, delaying it, delaying it, right? And so we want to make sure we don't get caught in that cycle. And then when we did do it, right, we like got my mom to watch Babe for a little while, which we were very blessed to have that opportunity. We got to go to a private kind of hotel space to do the do. Um, and we did the things, right? We worked on really relaxing my body. We took it slow. But I also remember hitting a point where it was like we are almost being too tender with it. And we kind of just needed to like rip the band aid off and have the experience so that we could get back into the momentum. So I guess what I want to say here is we can be intentional about it, but if we get too precious and too perfectionist about it, it's never going to fucking happen. And if you know it's important and you value it, there may become a point for you, like me, where you need to just like rip off the band aid a little bit or give yourself a nudge over the hill. But it should never be excruciatingly painful. And the more you expect it to be excruciatingly painful, the more it will be. It's kind of like a self fulfilling prophecy. We can always talk more about that one on one if you have questions about your scenario or how to plan that first date. That's what I do. And I'll give you details on that. All right, myth number 5, and then I want to get into kind of a couple of steps for how to approach this. So, myth number 5 is that your libido is going to be gone forever, right? We're all worried. Don't people just never want sex anymore after kids? And here is what I'm going to say on that. My tune has changed a little bit in the last couple of years. So, for many women, I would say their libidos do bounce right back, in particular after breastfeeding, which can be about a year for most people, sometimes less, sometimes more. So we need to remember that there's lots of physiological things happening in that first year that are going to suppress libido, including your body deliberately trying not to get pregnant while you're in this very tender, um, depleting phase of like feeding and keeping this baby alive, right? But for others, libido can be more tied to how you feel good in your body. It can be tied to the strength of your relationship and how supported you feel by your partner. And for others, your libido just might not ever feel like it works the way it used to work. And that can feel like a loss. It can feel like it disappeared, but there's a difference between your libido disappearing and shifting a little bit how it operates. And so, what we need to do is actually learn how our libido works now, especially in a long term relationship context, which is different than new, and with children and the factors that come there. And if you're curious about like all the different factors that can affect your libido, if you're curious in kind of troubleshooting that a little bit, if you go back to episodes, I think it's like 2 to 5, they're called the Brick Wall series. I go through all of the like physical, emotional, cultural, spiritual elements that might be affecting your libido, and you can start there. But what I want to say is, I don't really care anymore if your libido, quote unquote, comes back or if you feel like it's come back. I know after having done this work now and after having reinvented my own sex life that I don't have to have a raging, horny libido for sex to have an amazing sex life. And I was the higher libido partner when we met. Um, the bottom line is that you are only doomed to a dead bedroom if you don't essentially uplevel your skills. And you are already here starting to do that, which is awesome. The truth is, really, the best sex of your life lays ahead, not behind you, if you are willing to invest in your relationship and your understanding of sex. And that is what I am here to help you do, my friends. All right, so 6 myths about sex. I hope postpartum. I hope I have shifted your perspective, and I hope you're starting to see here that a lot of the expectations that you have are really driven by society. They're driven by shit advice led from a lack of sex ed. And what I want you to understand, bottom line, is that your sex life is yours to intentionally create as a couple and to recreate and recreate and recreate in different seasons. Okay. The sex I was having, 6 months postpartum after my first kid looked very different than the sex I was having 6 months postpartum after my second. And it looks very different than now, where my last kiddo is through the gate of 3. And I promise it's a whole universe on that side of things, for your relationship and for everything. So keep your hands on each other through the deep, dark forest. Let's talk about how to do that and keep investing and learning about this as you move forward. Okay. So, what are some steps that you can take to kind of prepare and or like make your first experience back to sex in those early postpartum days the best it can be? And so the first is, of course, drop the fucking expectations. It's going to take as long as it takes. And like I was saying before, there's this double-edged sword of we want to park it a little bit, park the conversation, park the pressure, because the more pressure you put on your partner, the less she's going to want to. We need to park it, but we can't drop that conversation so completely that it's impossible to pick up, like that we lose that ball and we don't even know how to pick it up again. So there's this dance that I want you to think about where, like, dads, I want you to be patient. You're going to feel left out. You're going to feel like she's not caring for you as much. You're going to feel like you're giving maybe more than you're getting. Tame your ego, give it some love, and like talk about what specific things she can do outside of sex to make you feel appreciated, to make you feel seen, to make you feel loved. One of the best things you can do is talk about some of the things that you miss. So maybe she used to like massage your back every Friday night, or maybe she used to like buy your favorite pack of beer on Fridays, whatever it was. Can you try to like think about how to do those things for yourself, or ask her for things that are within her capacity to give. But then the other piece is to continue the dialogue about this. So keep talking to each other about what makes each other feel appreciated and intimate. Keep touching base. Maybe make a plan for how often you want to check in on this. Maybe your wife goes, I just can't even have this conversation for 6 months. Fine. Park it, put a little reminder on the calendar that you're going to gently bring it up in 6 months and just see where each other's at, right? So drop your expectations, but keep the conversation going about how people are feeling, what their fears are, what their worries are, what their excitement is, what they look forward to, what they miss, and stay grounded always in the mutual goal that you love each other, that you want to be together, and that you want the strongest relationship possible for your kids and for each other. My second tip is to go solo exploring. So, for the people who had the baby, your first job, I would say, when you feel like your body is ready, is to masturbate, to get to know the lay of the land. And this is partly because you might have a lot of fears about it looking different and feeling different and all this stuff. And when you're trying to manage all those fears while you're having sex with your partner, while you're trying to manage his emotions, that's too much. So if you just take some intentional time to be in your own room solo, get out a mirror, look at what things are looking like, feel around, notice if like your go-to moves still work or if things feel a little bit different. Notice, is there a lot of tenderness or not a lot of tenderness at all? Maybe play with a dildo or vibrator, experiment with putting something inside your body and see how it feels. This is going to give you the lay of the land because you might be in a situation where you're terrified it's going to hurt and then you masturbate with a vibrator and you find out you are fine. And that's going to open up whole new possibilities rather than ruminating for months that you're afraid it's going to hurt. Just like find out if it does or doesn't. Masturbation is a big piece here. The other piece is to spend some time reflecting. So sit with your emotions around sex and intimacy post kids. Like, how are you feeling about your vagina? Did you have any birth trauma? Are you afraid of getting pregnant or of sex hurting? What worries do you have and what can you share with your partner? So, we want to drop these expectations. We want to keep the conversation going. Once we're starting to feel ready to explore that part of ourselves, we want to encourage our partner to explore solo. If you are the non birthing partner, encourage this of your partner. Give her space and time to do that. Hey, babe, I'm going to take the baby for a walk for half an hour. If you're feeling the energy and so inclined, why don't you have a little solo session and we can talk later tonight about what you found and what you discovered. Tip number 3 is to find ways to connect and foster your relationship. So, like I talked about earlier, put the oxygen mask on yourselves, but on each other as well, and find time to nurture connection. So, this could be little rituals like holding hands while you watch Netflix instead of not touching each other. It might mean gratitude bombing the shit out of each other. It might mean taking a little walk every day after work or on lunch together with the baby. Talking a lot is important. And if you need a cue here, just even like have a little date where you think through together what is 3 things that make you feel relaxed, 3 things that make you feel present, like in the moment, and 3 things that make you feel connected to your partner. Do those as often as you can, and that is how you will hold your hands through the deep, dark woods and get out on the other side. My last tip here is to get creative. Sorry, I have 2 last tips. My 4th tip is to get creative in how you play. And that means outer course, my friends. If you don't know what the word outer course means, it just means everything beyond a penis going in a vagina. So, in particular, if you've got a partner whose body is tender, or if they've got a C section scar, all of those kinds of things, you can make someone come by playing with their nipples. Did you actually know one of the most sensitive parts sexually of someone's bodies is their low belly? So those might be some no-go zones for people, right? Breasts can be really sensitive when we're breastfeeding, low belly, especially if we've got a scar. But taking time to play sensually with each other's bodies and explore other ways of touching each other and bringing each other pleasure can alleviate the stress of like intercourse, in particular, hurting. And it's also going to expand your sexual repertoire. My hot tip here and the bonus that I have in the Sex After Delivery guide is to do sensual genital massage. And so that doesn't mean sexual genital massage. What it means is literally giving your partner's vagina a back rub or your partner's penis a back rub. So those parts of our bodies have muscles just like every other part of our body. Those parts of our bodies have muscles that get tense and tight and need relaxation and support. And so if you do a massage like this, all you're doing is massaging that person's part of their body without the goal of getting them aroused, without the goal of getting them wet, horny, hard. Those things might happen, but it's not the goal. And we don't have the goal or the pressure of intercourse. So if it leads to it, if people agree to it, great, but we don't sit down with the intention. We sit down the intention with exactly the same, I'm going to rub your back for 10 minutes, but instead I'm going to rub your vagina for 10 minutes. You can do this for yourself. You can massage your own genitals. As a person who had the baby, that can be really healing and restorative for you to just spend time with your body. Again, not with the goal of having the orgasm, but just of like touching your body and saying hi to it. And as the partner who didn't give birth, one of the first sex dates, quote unquote, you could have is just giving your partner a genital massage. And it's a way for them to start to feel safety with your hands and maybe your mouth if they're willing on that part of your body, but without the pressure or intention of horniness. So, in the free guide that I have for you, I have a bonus video where I walk you through 3 genital massage moves for penises and for vaginas. And I highly encourage you to just give this a shot. So, my last tip is to implement the Naked Sexy Fun Time framework. And that is my process for planning a sex date that doesn't suck. You can use this at any time, but it's a simple 4-step process for initiating well, planning a party your libido wants to come to, and having the best time possible, as well as adopting a growth mindset where we're going to learn what worked and didn't work and implement that over time so that we can have the best naked, sexy, fun times possible. So, this is the perfect framework for planning your first time back in the sack or your first, your third, fourth, fifth time. If you are highly stressed about how it's going to feel, if you are highly stressed about how it's going to go, if you're feeling a lot of anxiety in your body, if you are the supporting partner and you have no idea how to initiate your partner to this without getting resistance, this is your step by step guide. And in the mini course that I offer, we talk about how to plan the date, and then I have a literal guided activity for you to get you from parent mode into sexy time mode. So, in summary, my friends, we want to drop this expectations and open up the conversation with each other about who is ready for what and when. We want to engage in some solo play and some solo reflection on, in particular, our fears and worries and what we're willing to do. We want to find other ways to connect and foster our relationship. We want to get creative in how we play and embrace outer course, and we want to start planning sex dates that are amazing instead of shitty. So, I hope that was useful for you. I would love to hear what concerns you might be having. Like I said, if you're struggling with the libido piece, head back to the earliest episodes of the podcast where I talk more about the specific factors that affect libido and how we can support that. There's tons of episodes with all kinds of good advice. If you're struggling to open up this conversation, I've got 2 episodes on how to have this conversation well. And make sure that you grab the Sex After Delivery guide below, where I walk you through all of these pieces with the bonus guided genital massage. And I'll also put the link for the Naked Sexy Fun Times workshop if and when you are ready. The last piece I will say is if you are listening to all this and you're like, oh, she gets it, but she didn't quite speak to like my situation or my thing that I'm worried about, you can always book a totally free 30-minute reset roadmap call where we will talk about your specific situation and walk you through your next 4 or 5 steps to go from where you are today to where you want to be. I will catch you next time.
This is the part where we do the end bit, right? My friends, let's take a mindfulness minute here. Take a deep breath in. Open that mouth and let out a big, deep, full body sigh. Voila, your nervous system thanks you. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope that your head and your heart have something new to consider, something new to talk about, and something new to try. No husbands were harmed in the making of this podcast, and a big thank you to my husband for his help and original music composition. Love you, babe. This podcast was recorded on the traditional territories of the Kwanlin First Nation and Tonquachan Council in Whitehorse, Yukon. We acknowledge and are grateful to the original stewards of this land where we get to play, live, and raise our children. You can catch me on the Instagram at the Happy V Project for tips, tools, and anecdotes. And you can also join the weekly-ish newsletter for dispatches from my bedroom and my brain. Also, head to thehappyvaginaproject.com to learn more about how you can work with me. Catch you next time.